This Thursday, December 6th, from 1 to 3 p.m. Eastern, is a fantastic online summit and PD opportunity about personalized learning. I'll tell you more at the end of the show how to join the conversation. I'll be co-leading with Text Help and the other Ed Week participants. Best Practices with Games and Play-Based Learning in the Classroom, episode 399.
The 10-Minute Teacher Podcast with Vicki Davis. Every weekday, you'll learn powerful, practical ways to be a more remarkable teacher today.
Games and play-based learning. Today, we're talking with C. Ross Flatt, the Director of Programs and Partnerships at the Institute of Play, as we think about play and games in the classroom. So, Ross, there's been a lot of conversation about the fact that play has not been in the classroom. Are you seeing a shift back in schools towards appreciating play?
I think so. A lot of the work that my organization, the Institute of Play, does is we're actually asked to work with middle school and high schools a lot. And we notice that age group of students really value the idea of bringing play back into the classroom because play and games do things really well to teach kids 21st century skills and soft skills. That's really where play is really able to benefit collaboration, communication, empathy. We see these things in younger ages, but like you said, it's a lot of that starts to take a back seat to the teaching of content. And unfortunately, that happens earlier and earlier and earlier. So, the work that we do is we try to bring, those ideas and values back into classroom settings.
So give us some examples of play or game-based learning at the middle school and high school level that you think teach these skills and are meaningful.
Sure. So Institute of Play has these 7 principles of game-based learning that really guide the work that we do. So if you think about things that games do really well, that frames these 7 ideas. So, games value the idea that failure is reframed as iteration, right? It's a chance to learn and redo. Games show you how things are interconnected, how you can, how there's a constant challenge, and that's very valuable. How you learn by actually doing something, how you learn in a very playful way. And most importantly, I think that games and play do really well is you get immediate feedback. You are constantly knowing how you are doing as a player throughout an entire game, whether it's a board game or a digital game or a sports game, right? If you're winning or losing, if you're good or you're bad. So if you take those ideas and you bring them into a classroom setting, you're doing game-based learning. So it doesn't mean that you're actually playing a specific game, but it means that you're taking the things that make games really special and unique and valuable, and you're bringing those ideas into a classroom. Games can do that in a lot of ways really well. And the way that I used to use games in my classroom when I was a classroom teacher is to assess student learning. So I would play a game as a way to embed assessment within the classroom setting, and that way, as students are playing a game that might involve them using specific vocabulary as part of the actual game that they're playing, or doing certain game mechanics or actions that require them to use skills that we were teaching in the classroom. I can see how well these students are doing these things. I can see how well the students can talk about their use of these things, and the game allows them to do it in a very natural and meaningful way.
Okay, do you have any examples for us? Because I'm just thinking, you've got all these kids playing a game. How are you assessing for learning as they're playing the game?
Sure. Yeah. So the trick with a great learning game is to make sure that it is not chocolate covered broccoli. What we consider to be chocolate covered broccoli is something that really is just a worksheet or a review disguised as a game with like certain games, bells and whistles. We call it chocolate covered broccoli because it's just, you're trying to like hide, the nutrients. But kids see right through that. Teachers see right through that, and it's not really that effective. So when you're trying to create a good learning game, or you're trying to use a good learning game, you want to think about, are the actions and the movements and the mechanics of the game that players are doing, aligning to specific learning goals. So a game that I used to do in my classroom was a game that I co-created with a game designer called Galactic Mappers. It's something you can get on the Game Crafter. If you just do a Google search for Galactic Mappers, you should be able to get a set. And the idea behind the game is that students are making a collaborative giant class map. The learning goals I had for sixth grade was I wanted my students to be able to read and design maps, and I wanted them to be able to use physical geography, vocabulary, and terminology and skills at the very beginning of the year, because when we learned about ancient civilization later, all these things were going to be important throughout the entire year. So the game actually has them building a map in different rounds. It has them using specific cards that allow them to activate and design things like volcanoes and mountains and rivers and other bodies of water. And as they're designing these things in a group, I can watch their small groups doing this, and I can see how well they're able to actually design and label a map. Are they able to, differentiate between a continent and between an island? Are they able to show how a valley develops around a series of mountains or hills? Do they know very specifically what, the different terminology is on certain cards they get? So if they get an isthmus card and they have to create an isthmus with another group, do they know how that works, and do they know what that looks like? Or do they have to, go back and research that and look that up? And it's fine if they do, but I'm just starting to learn a lot more about, where they are in their development around this. I'm also embedding. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
It also allows me to embed things like, teamwork. I can see who the leaders in my classroom are very early on in the year. I was able to see who the great artists were. I could see who were really, who was really good at collaboration, who could deal with frustration. It allowed me to do all of that. And that's something that games do really well in a very seamless way.
So what common mistakes do we teachers make that cause games to be a distraction and detract from learning instead of adding to it?
That's a great question. So I would say that when teachers don't treat games as though they were any other tool in their toolbox, they can start to get into trouble with this. And what I mean by that is you wouldn't consider something like, reading a book as a class, or having students do a writing assignment, or, some sort of like collaborative project. You wouldn't consider that to be sort of an additional thing you're doing to your curriculum. You would consider that to be part of a very rich curriculum. And a game can be the same way. When teachers sort of acknowledge that they're going to put everything on pause and then play this game, then it sort of lessens the impact of what it is. When teachers think that the game is going to solve all of their problems and do all of the teaching for them and all of the assessment for them, and just sort of magically teach students through osmosis, then the game is not going to be effective. What you have to do is you have to think about, what are you doing before you play a game in class? What are you as the teacher doing during a game in class? And what are you doing after? So during the game, hopefully you're going around and writing important observations down. You have a rubric in front of you. You're looking for specific, specific, learning moments that you can capture, as opposed to sort of going around the classroom and playing what I call rule whack-a-mole. You're just kind of explaining the rules of the game and making sure students are, aren't fighting or aren't getting overly frustrated. Those are all things you kind of have to do, but that shouldn't be the main thing that you're doing. What you should be doing is assessing student learning.
So Ross, as we finish up, you've already mentioned Game Crafters. Are there 2 or 3 other resources we can point teachers to where they can find some awesome classroom games?
Yeah, absolutely. So Institute of Play has a couple games on our website that we have as examples. There's a math game we have called Absolute Blast, and there's another great ELA game that you could use literally from elementary school all the way to college called Socratic Smackdown. It's a gamified version of a Socratic book discussion, essentially. So the Institute of Play website is a great place to go. On Edutopia, there's lots of great resources. There's a Made with Play series that Institute of Play created that gives a lot of examples, and then through looking at those specific examples, each one is sort of framed around one of our principles of game-based learning. That'll lead you to other resources that you can check out. I know ABC Mouse has some great examples for elementary school, and BrainPop's really great for elementary and early middle school.
Excellent. So we will link to all of these resources in the show notes, but I would encourage you teachers, get out there and play with your students as they learn. I've written about Text Help before in their awesome Read Write toolbar and the Equatio Math Helper for Google and Microsoft. This Thursday, December 6th, from 1 to 3 p.m. Eastern Time, EdWeek is hosting an event all about personalized learning. I'll be co-hosting a panel conversation on how I help kids learn how to personalize their own learning, how we can differentiate instruction, and we'll have an old-fashioned tool of speed share at 2 p.m. in the room. Even if you can't attend live, you can sign up and review the links and transcripts later. Get ready to talk about personalized learning this Thursday from 1 to 3 p.m. Eastern. Just go to https://text.help/coolcatteacher and sign up to join the conversation.
Thank you for listening to the 10-Minute Teacher Podcast. You can download the show notes and see the archive at coolcatteacher.com/podcast. Never stop learning.